This is the Myco Hangout.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Central Texas Mycological Society Myco Hangout. We are joined here by SamtheFungi. So we're gonna jump right into this conversation. Sam, introduce yourself. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll kind of go from there.
For sure. So I'm SamtheFungi. I am a mushroom. Born and raised in Central Texas, so really familiar with the ecology of this area, but never really been one to study it until about 3 years ago, when I started getting a pretty bad illness, stomach illness. I wasn't able to eat a lot of foods. I started reaching out into different forms of alternative medicine. I found reishi. I was like, oh my gosh, if psychedelics can do this much for my mind, what else can they do for my body? What haven't I explored? So I started diving into the world of mycology, and through reishi and the healing that it brought my body, I was able to really find a passion in fungus that I hadn't found anywhere else, and threw myself into the immersive field of mushrooms that we all love. Started experimenting with different ones, especially like different forms of reishi, but going out into my environment and trying to find them. That was where I found the most benefit, especially in terms of absorbing the knowledge and keeping it available.
Nice. That's very cool. So you brought up something that I kind of want to get to in a little bit more. You said you are a mushroom. What do you mean by that?
So, mushrooms are composed of many different filaments and a lot of different beings coming together as one to create what we know as a mushroom. And we're so similar. We have trillions of beings within ourselves that all work together to form what we interact with, and our personalities, everything about us. So that's one way that I view myself as a mushroom. Another way is, we grow up in these bodies. We spread our spores with our words. When they get implanted into other people's minds, and they germinate and they form other mushrooms in the mind, and then they go out as spores. And another way, we're mushrooms.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah. That makes sense to me. It's so for me, there's like two kind of tracks of mine that go there. Like there's that kind of more metaphorical sense that you were just kind of talking about, but there's also that like deep evolutionary history that we have. Like fungi are one of animals' most recent common ancestors, or last common ancestors, where we like diverge from them millions of years ago, millions and millions of years ago. So I just find that kind of fascinating, how like there is like that, I don't know, literal truth of like animals being evolving, diverging through the evolutionary tree from fungi, and then also like as you're talking about, like being multiple strands of, I don't know, identity in one being, spreading our ideas around like spores and stuff like that. So this is a Mycophile's question. Like, what's your favorite mushroom?
Ooh, so that changes as I discover more mushrooms, and as I start to interact with more. Different ones come into my field of vision that they strike my fancy. Right now, the one that's striking my fancy is cordyceps. So Cordyceps militaris is the most commonly found one here, as you know. But that one, I found such a drastic increase in the efficiency and effectiveness in my life through consuming cordyceps. It gives me a lot more stamina. It gives me a little bit more of a clarity of mind. And in fact, earlier today, I used cordyceps. I brought some tea that I had made and shared with everybody. And in this tea, I had about 2 grams of cordyceps. It was very potent, but it was perfect because it was like on a fast. I was on the river, no food, no breakfast, just water. So it was like clear, focused energy, and it was nice. It was very, very good.
Nice.
So cordyceps.
So cordyceps and and energy, pure
Oh, yeah.
cordyceps energy. That's awesome. Um, so I guess like how do you, besides like consuming them and like using them as like functional like herbal supplements, how would you say that other ways you integrate fungi into your life?
I would say I integrate fungus as a thought process. Like I try to think like mycelium. So moving through one step at a time, digesting things as I go, um, not trying to expand too quickly, which is something I'm still practicing on, because that is some of the most difficult things, is like limiting what I want to do and what I actually can do. It's like there's a difference. But that mental process of thinking like a mushroom has made my life a little bit more easy. Straight up, just easier.
Nice. Um, well, yeah, that's great. I think like that's an important thing to realize, is to not we shouldn't spread ourselves so thin. And I think, yeah, growing within the limits of what our environment supports is a great lesson to draw from fungi. Um, it's excuse me. So yeah, like, oh, I don't know. I should have prepared more questions for this interview. So you are the vice president of Central Texas Mycological Society. What drew you to want to participate and help this organization grow?
Well, like mycelium, we're stronger together. So we each are all unique mycophiles in our own rights, and we all have our own strengths and things that we have our passions for. Yes, Angel, mycelial mass. But with those passions, when they come together, then we can create a system where that's sustainable. So we can sustain all of our passions by being passionate in our own right. And I was like, how can I learn more about fungus? How can I get more involved in this world? And I found Myco Alliance, and I was like, oh, that's awesome. I'm going to go take a class with Daniel. So I took a class with Daniel, and Daniel was like, well, we're talking about starting this cool group called the Central Texas Mycological Society. We're having a planning meeting next Thursday. And I was like, oh, sweet. I'm free next Thursday. I'll go. I'm like, that sounds like a fun time. So I showed up, and that's where I met you for the first time, and Allie and Lisa. And I believe Angel was, I don't know. I don't know if Angel was there in that meeting. But I was like, oh my gosh, y'all are so great. Whoa. There are other people that know this much about mushrooms, and they're available to me locally. And they're starting a group, a collective that's going to be about mushroom education. I'm so in. Where do I sign up? And then you had a sheet, and you were like, you sign up right here. And I was like, oh, cool. So I signed up, and that's how I got started with CTMS.
Yeah, awesome. I guess so. For people who don't know a little bit more about like the Central Texas Mycological Society, we're a fairly new organization. We are what's considered a direct democracy organization. Basically, you join, you become a member. either through paying membership dues, or like if you can't afford the dues, we can, work something out with you through volunteering or something. And yeah, and you start to participate. You can come up with ideas, interact with the community, and if everyone, because we're a direct democracy organization, if a lot of people start to really um, gravitate towards one idea, then it can really start to take on a life of its own. But like really, what we want to do with this group is to help foster people's interest and growth in fungi and in mushrooms, in the variety of different facets, and to provide like an institutional resource for people to kind of build off their knowledge off of. Um, and hopefully we take over all of Texas, not just keep it limited to Central Texas. And we're starting to do that now. So um, with more members in Houston and in the Dallas area, I mean, we even have some out in West Texas. So yeah, if anybody is wanting to participate more, the Discord's a great place to kind of start to have these conversations um, outside of the meetings and planning meetings and stuff like that. Um, so yeah.
So in that vein of getting new members from in different spots, what I'd like to see is some members in Corpus Christi, some mycophiles in Corpus, bringing up these samples from different polluted areas. I really love to see mushrooms that have been grown or that have been grown by nature in these heavily industrialized areas, especially like Corpus Christi. It's just a massive oil refinery, basically, of a town, and there's a lot of pollution in that area. So when we can get our hands on those mushrooms and start to grow them out and culture them out and study them and see what they're doing to their environment to change it, then we can get really going, and it would help not only us as an organization but the world in general.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a really great project, and that kind of makes me want to ask what other projects would you like to see the Central Texas Mycological Society take on? Because like, I know I mean, we have conversations kind of regularly about this kind of stuff, but I feel like um, people might be inspired by some of the ideas that you have about what maybe they would like to see out of their organization.
Yeah, well, there's always tons of ideas. There's always like as soon as like, yes, a mobile lab. Oh my goodness, Carter. Yes, a mobile lab is something that would be so sweet to see because I mean, once we can take our knowledge on the road, yes, Alan Rockefeller style. Once we can get it going and like get a bus and have a laboratory that we have all sorts of samples on, and we can take all these different places. Like we can go park the bus in the big thicket, like where we were the 2 weekends ago, and just stay there for a month and have like a rotating like crew of mycologists. Like people stay for like 3 days, and all they do is go and find mushrooms and culture them out in the laboratory. And we have other people that just come in that want to learn how to do laboratory stuff. And then we have just a more availability of knowledge to the wider community. So that way we can say like, oh, you want us to show up at your school, and then you want us to teach your kids how to use the laboratory and how to find mushrooms and how to treat them in a sterile environment and how to deal with sterile environments like that. The
Yeah,
applications are endless.
the mobile lab for taking to like elementary schools and stuff is something that I would really like to see, because it, I mean, yeah, you kind of use a scalpel sometimes, but culturing a mushroom isn't necessarily that of of an extreme skill. Like it doesn't require a lot. Like it requires learning some of the basics, and then just like practice going through the motions. And it's something that like I feel like relatively young people could learn how to do and spark their interest in biology and microbiology a lot sooner. I know I would have loved to have done something like that in high school or in middle school. And I think for me, another kind of aspect of the educational project that I would really like to see done is like when we were starting to work on this pre-COVID, was starting to teach through the public libraries and really build relationships out with the public libraries and try and have like fungariums inside the public library and even culture libraries that people could come and like check out a strain of mushroom that they would like to grow or learn more about. And but I guess like have it be instead of like at a university, the public library really trying to grab more people and in the public, put it in the public's mind. Sorry, got distracted by the chat. If anybody has any like questions or like that they want to have answered, just feel free to drop them in the chat too. Yeah, and I think going out to schools is like something that I've always wanted to really be able to do, because I like you never know who you're gonna kind of inspire to really take on a whole new trajectory and to learn about fungi, and and yeah, there's just so much potential in there. I know we kind of have talked a little. I know people are really interested in like mycoremediation and stuff like that too, and that's something that I don't even have the wherewithal to develop. So it's definitely going to take
The regarding the myco remediation, I have a project idea for that, but I need help in the plants department because I'm not skilled in that area very much. But maybe someone who's watching is, so you can maybe help me. So I want to combine long-rooted plants like sunflowers, hemp, daikon radishes with different types of mycorrhizal fungi or fungi and different types of saprophytic fungi and see how they can work together in some sort of symbiosis to clean up the deep soils in a contaminated area. Because like the project we were doing at Circle Acres with the mycoremediation, it's an awesome project. It's a good idea, and there was a lot of headway made in it, but there was no real way to like test the specific spots in the soil because we were doing so much basically soil creation by layering mycelium on mycelium instead of being able to spread it out over the entire landfill. So it was being concentrated in one area and not, and who knows what effect it was having in terms of the broader remediation of that area, but specifically to that section, it was doing something, but we don't really know. So
right. Yeah, then that's the thing with remediation projects is like they can actually become dangerous to deal with because you are dealing with like really toxic chemicals sometimes, and and like it takes a lot to clean up those sites too. So any sort of rudimentary research that we can kind of do and help kind of, I don't know, lower that bar of entry for people to kind of to learn more about microremediation or to figure out ways to scale it up. And I think like by pushing people to kind of to talk about this, we push people to do more research into it. Another project that I really want to get working on is looking for the entomopathogenic fungi, the fungi that eat insects, and start to try and find like ones that we could hopefully develop into like mycopesticides and such to lower the impact of like toxic chemicals and on agricultural systems, but also I'm of the mind that we have to do a lot more of a holistic management in our crop productions and decentralize our food system a lot in order to eliminate a lot of those other negative aspects that contribute to climate change. You look like you had a thought that you wanted to say something about the insect collection.
Yeah, that is a $1 trillion idea. If we can just have more people out in the field studying entomopathogenic fungus, like that is definitely something that needs to happen more. Because I mean, we have that one that was created. Do you remember what it was called? It was like Bio Med or Bio.
I can't remember.
I can't remember the name of it. But I know it was bought by Monsanto, and now it's no longer sold on the market because they own the patent for it.
Yeah,
So.
they shelved it. And that actually reminds me of another thing that I would like to pursue through the society is to like as we do research on these intellectual properties, we can potentially be the quote unquote owners of the intellectual property, and because we are a direct democracy community organization, it stays in that technology and that information stays in the hands of the people, and so it doesn't get soaked up and like put away behind closed doors in order to like support those multi-billion-dollar corporations in their pursuit of dominating our food systems. So that's another thing that I feel like the Mycological Society has a lot of potential to do, is to democratize a lot of this technology that gets commodified by our current economic model. It's a kind of a way to fight back against that. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or if that's just me going off
No,
on my dreams, but
I agree. I believe that having an organization that is a direct democracy, that is truly controlled by the people, is the way to go for information. Free information is a thing that needs to happen. Free information.
yeah, and that's definitely something that we're trying to do with the society, is like take information that's been locked up in the expensive halls of academia and translate it to a broad audience so people can feel more integrated into the integrated into the ecologies that they work on. Sorry, I got distracted by an interesting comment in the chat. I wonder if an alternative solution may be a fungicide for endosymbionts in insect guts. Not as cool, but kills the fungi and another. I mean, either way, really, I think as long the idea that behind like finding those entomopathogenic fungi, those cordyceps-like fungi, is to be using like and amplifying ecological control. So like if you could find some sort of like parasite or something that was living inside the insects that you could change or amplify somehow, that would also be a good way to approach it. I know like Trad Cotter, who is someone that everyone should check out. He has talked a lot about he's talked a lot about about using like wasp cordyceps fungi, and then have those by spraying the spores on a nest, and then the spores being there kind of having this like residual effect. So there's lots of ways to accomplish these goals. So Sam, tell us about your work in San Antonio.
Ooh, so my work in San Antonio, like my jobs or what I do in the fungus world.
Well, I mean the fungal world. I mean, I guess you could talk about what you do for your to pay the rent or whatever. I'm sure
They
people
all
would do need to
kinda.
hear that, to know that we're this isn't our full-time job.
That's for certain.
So yeah,
Hopefully one day it will be, but not yet.
yeah. So
Um,
would you mind going into some of the stuff that you do down?
Down in the good old San Ann.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do I do a bunch of stuff in San Antonio. One of my favorite things to do is take people on walks around different parks in that area and go out and find fungus. Just go out and see what we got. Especially documenting that for iNaturalist. It's always a beautiful thing. And setting up mushroom beds for people. So as we get lots of donations from Hi-Fi, so something that I've been striving to do is with my close friends and family members that are members of CTMS. I'm like, hey, like, are you interested in learning more about fungus? Do you want a mushroom bed installed in your property? So I'll go and like throw a mushroom bed out there, teach them about it, teach them how to maintain it. But to see the joy on people's faces when they get their first flush of mushrooms, oh my goodness. Like I get videos, like I set up one for my friend Ricky, and the video he took when he got his first mushroom, it was beautiful. It almost made tears come to my eyes. I was overcome with joy to see his joy about seeing a mushroom that he grew that he's gonna eat. Inspiring people to create landscapes that produce food is something that just drives me up the wall with passion. It just makes me feel so like excited.
Yeah, that is really exciting. Um, so is that, a Sam the Fungi is like your name that you're going by for this little event right here. Uh, would you care to kind of explain what's going on with Sam the Fungi and that whole enterprise?
Yeah. Um, so I am a courier for Hi-Fi. So I buy mushrooms from Hi-Fi and bring them to San Antonio for people who don't have time to go to the New Braunfels farmers markets. Um, which one's growing in this climate? There's a ton of different ones that grow in this climate. Oh yeah. The mushroom beds I usually set up are oysters. So I try to get a wide variety of them whenever I do installations. So I'll try to do like two different types of oysters, like a gold and a blue, or like a pearl and a yellow. Um, the yellows and the pinks have a hard time outside. The pinks produce, but you got to get them really quick, and they're usually pretty small. Just because there's so much, the air gets so dry here. That's the one thing about growing mushrooms outside in Texas, is the climate is very dry. It's hot for the most part, so you do have to add a lot of water to your beds, which in the end is not quite a sustainable solution, but we're working on it. Um, oh, nice! That's awesome, Jennifer. Um, so in addition to selling mushrooms from Hi-Fi, I also I'm going to do more classes. I just moved into a new house like 2.5 weeks ago, so I'm still getting myself settled, getting my roots planted. But the house is in New Braunfels, but I do work in San Antonio still. Um, but when I do get more established, my goal is to have like an immersive experience. So like you'll come to my house and I'll teach you about like indoor laboratory work, just like very beginner basic stuff about like how do you work with agar, and like what is liquid culture and how do you work around that, what is the septic technique and how important is it. Very aseptic technique is extremely important all the time. And to have that immersive experience to where you can come like for the whole day and just like hang out, and we'll like go over a bunch of mushroom stuffs and learn, and then we in the end of the day, or like we have an excursion where we go and we find a mushroom, whether that's like a wild edible, like oysters, because you can find a lot of oysters wild, especially pearl oysters. Along the Comal River, they're everywhere. There's one tree. Every time my friends see it, they always think of me because they're like, "There's oysters growing on that tree," and they'll always point it out to me, and they'll be like, "Hey, there's oysters on the tree today," and I'll be like, "Oh, it's time for me to go to the river." And so I'll go to the river, harvest these oysters, and come home and like cook them up. Or some of the times, what I've been doing is culturing them out using cardboard tech, because cardboard tech is some of the easiest way. It really is the easiest way
Could
to
you
like.
explain it real quick?
Oh yeah, totally. Cardboard tech, super simple. Get your favorite mushroom, um, as long as it's like saprophytic, meaning it eats wood. So you can't get like really crazy ones like morels or truffles or chanterelles or anything like that. But if you have like oysters or shiitakes, let's take shiitakes for example, because they're ones that are perfect for this. The butts of shiitakes, all those things that you can't eat, they're too woody. You get those and you put them aside or put them in the fridge for a day. Let them get like really nice and hungry. Right before you take them out of the fridge, get some cardboard, some American-made cardboard. That's an important aspect. Amazon boxes are all American-made right now, so they're a perfect candidate for this. You get that Amazon box, that American-made cardboard, and you soak it in some water. You want to soak it for like about 10 minutes. You don't have to soak it too long. You want it to be moist and saturated, but not sopping wet. So you want to be able to like pick it up and have it like not really drip too much. But if you're picking it up and it's dripping a bunch, like it's too wet. The last cardboard tech I did, they were way too wet and it's still consolidating. And I did it like a month and a half ago. They should have been done like a month ago. But you get them at the correct moisture levels. You put the butts of the shiitakes in there that you took out of the fridge. They're hungry now, so they're gonna just like devour that cardboard. You roll it up into like a taco or a burrito like shape, and you put that into an airtight container of your choice. Usually, recycled Ziploc bags are good. I like to take at one of the jobs that I have in San Antonio, I work at a re-up station, so it's a zero waste store, and people bring their compost there sometimes, and so I save people's compost bags, and then I'll grow mushrooms in the compost bags. And my goal is to, when someone brings me compost, to give them a mushroom bag as thanks. Be like, hey, thanks for giving me your old food that I'm going to turn into good soil. Here's some food for you that you can grow out and eat later. So yes, cardboard tech, very simple. American-made cardboard, nice and hydrated. The mushrooms that you want to put in there, put them in like a taco, roll it up, airtight container, leave it on the counter for probably like 3 weeks. What is important about American-made? American-made cardboard is made under stricter regulations than other cardboard is. So a lot of other cardboard, especially Chinese cardboard, it's made using who knows what kind of chemicals and what kind of different materials that may or may not be healthy, or even like in some cases it like could be carcinogenic. So we don't want to be eating cancer mushrooms. We want to be eating healthy mushrooms. It's a very good question. Do you feel like I covered cardboard tech pretty well?
Definitely. I don't know. I kind of derailed you when you were in the middle of another explanation because I wanted people to know what the cardboard tech was. So if you don't remember what that was, I can ask you another question. But
well, it was just going to the river and the excursions. So the all-inclusive package of SamtheFungi. You have your excursion. At the end of the day, we go out, we find a mushroom, we discover what we can do with that mushroom, whether it be like the cardboard tech with the oysters or any other woodier mushrooms that we find that are edible that we want to keep mycelium running from. Or if we find some reishi, because there's reishi that also grows along the Comal River. The Comal and the Guadalupe River both have reishi in pretty prolific amounts. So you're able to go and harvest it pretty ethically. And making a tincture out of that or drying it out and keeping it as like a nice little souvenir. In fact, I have one of the mushrooms from the Comal right here next to me.
Yeah, grab it. Yeah, people are always very surprised to learn about the diversity when they're just getting into fungi.
Hello, can you hear me? Ooh, I can't hear you.
Hear you, Sam? Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Why? That's what was going on there. Weird. So yeah, do you have your fresh catch from today?
It's not from today, unfortunately, but it is from the Comal, and this is it.
Oh man, that's a beautiful one.
Yeah, it is absolutely gorgeous. Some little mushroom show and tell for you today.
Yeah, show that top again. That's beautiful.
The mushroom of immortality.
Yeah, I love finding those around here. Have you been able to culture any of those live? Because I've always had trouble culturing the ganodermas that I've found. Like, where would? Yeah, so have you been able to culture them?
I have not been able to have a successful culture of one run. I had one start to run, and then it got really contaminated, and I couldn't get it to clean up. I haven't tried recently with these cultures or with this patch that I found. This patch is actually right by the tube chute, so I see it pretty regularly. And it fluctuates in where it likes to fruit. So when it starts to show its next signs of primordia, I'm going to go ahead and take a sample from that. Take a really small sample this time and just like I'm going to do the syringe method. So I'm going to get the end of a needle syringe and just stab it into the mushrooms and take that out. And that's going to be my sample. And I'm hoping that it'll be a more clean grab. Because before, what I've been doing is mostly basically like this. Like I just like either I cut a piece off or like the last one I did, not this one specifically, but I broke this off and then I took the sample from this piece, but it was exposed to air for hours before I was able to take my sample.
Yeah. Yeah, I've always had trouble. One thing that I've wanted to try though that I've heard works pretty well is letting it dry out a little bit and using a dried sample because then the bacteria is kind of died back a little bit, so you're less likely to get contamination that way. Um, yeah. So you do a lot of cultivation. What is your favorite kind to cultivate, or like do you have a favorite one that you like to cultivate?
I do. I really like the way that Platorius grows, like the way that it spreads its mycelium, and throws its like rhizomorphs out, like that kind of growth. Just like it just makes me giddy.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. It's so beautiful to watch because you start to see these like thick strands like get thrown out and one from like one section to another, and you see them start to like throw out more thick strands, and then you see in the like further back in the mycelial highway, like they're starting to strengthen up and get really strong and thick, and then opening the jar and smelling them. That smell of mycelium, it beats any other smell for me. It's like morning dew after a good night's rest.
Yeah, that is refreshing. Um, so if someone is just getting into fungi or cultivating or like what would you give, what kind of advice would you give to beginners kind of moving wanting to learn more about mycology and mushrooms?
First off, you have an awesome resource available to you that most people don't, called the Central Texas Mycological Society. So if you're not a member, you need to sign up immediately. Um, the second bit of advice that I would say is have conversations about mushrooms and start to integrate them into every moment that you can in your life, because the more you speak about them, the more you bring them to the front of your mind to where they're just always there, the more you're going to be able to receive that constant knowledge that they're always giving you. Because in my opinion, we're always getting a download from Mother Nature, and as soon as you go outside, like you're getting a download somewhere somehow, whether that's the way that bird is singing to you, or like looking at that little tiny speck of weird color that's on the forest floor that's actually a mushroom. And it's actually like a really like hygroseebs are some of the coolest mushrooms, and that's the one I'm speaking of specifically. Is like you go down and you see these small little things. So if you're not signed up for CTMS, talking about mushrooms and going outside, you should start doing all of those things, because that's how you're going to get involved, and that's how you'll truly live the life of a mushroom, because you are a mushroom whether you accept it or not. I'm just kidding.
Snap.
So
Um, no, that makes me think about like to kind of go off on a little tangent that what you said about like going out to nature and receiving that download. It reminds me, I mean, of the research that I've been doing, which for my graduate thesis, which is studying like the how ecological literacy, like how we know and can read our environment around us, like how that impacts like our psychological well-being. Obviously my hypothesis is that like the higher the ecological literacy, the more psychological well-being one experiences. um,
mm,
and because the reason why, you know, that's my hypothesis is because there's a lot of evidence already that shows just like passive observation of nature has these same sort of restorative benefits on our psychology and whatnot. So in my mind, like, and this also goes back to like our evolutionary context where we were beings that communicated with each other about these organisms in our environment almost on a daily basis, like a very intimate relationship where we're like we were, you know, harvest plants and fungi and animals like on it very consistently, and that was like very that was knowing those things very deeply and intimately was necessary for survival. Whereas now we've kind of now in our modern context we've kind of lost a lot of that language for talking about our natural environment, and so like, you know, that's kind of where I'm trying to bring it back in is like if we get more people um, learning and being able to look at a tree or a fungus and say like, oh, I know what that is, as opposed to it just being like another passive thing in the environment, does that strengthen our the restorative aspects of being out in nature? So yeah, it just kind of yeah, you saying that made me think of that research that I guess I've been doing, um, and as I hope that that convinces people to join the Mycological Society, so they can go on forays with Sam and he can teach you about all the different fungi. Um, the foray was last weekend, right?
Yeah,
at Circle Acres. How you want to kind of talk about that and what's it like to be on a foray with Sam the Fungi?
definitely. Well, in my opinion, being on a foray with me is pretty great. Um, I really like mushrooms. They make me really happy, and going out and being with mushrooms and people makes me even more happy. So being on a foray with me is just being immersed in nature. It's just going out and getting in the thick of it, trying to be as close to the energies as we can be. Something that you'll see if you go on a foray with me is I'll take off my shoes and just kind of walk around without shoes the whole time, because that for me is what really grounds me to that area and allows me to tap into that mycelium mind, the Myco mind, and feel out the mushrooms. You'll also learn and experience dialogue with mushrooms, asking them, hey, is it okay for me to harvest you? Or who are you? Asking them who they are is a really good way to get an answer. Because oftentimes we just don't ask. We don't ask nature enough, who are you? What are you doing here? And like something that I talked about last weekend was nature is an amazing communicator. Nature communicates on every level, from a planetary scale to an atomical scale to a universal scale. Like is constant communication, constant downloads and uploads. And we are some of the worst beings at communication on this planet. We just suck at it. So we suck at it with each other, with our surroundings, but most importantly, above everything, we suck at it with ourselves. And that self communication, that self dialogue, that gnosis is what allows you, that going in is what allows you to be able to understand what you're viewing in your outside world, but also to be able to integrate the lessons that are constantly being brought to you. Because we're always learning, we're always being downloaded. But until we learn the language of the download and the frequency it's on, we'll never be able to receive it. So going on forays with me, I show you my method on how I become attuned to those frequencies, and how I listen and hear the language, and hopefully inspire you to be able to seek your own tuning forks and be able to find your frequencies for your downloads, because everybody's is different.
Yeah, everybody has a little bit different lens of seeing the world, and everyone's kind of at different spots in their journey. So it makes sense that like people would need to tune in, are going to tune into different things. Um,
Sam, do you think you'll do another foray before the end of the year?
Ooh, before the end of the year, do you want me to?
Yes. I missed
Okay.
what you just did. I was bummed.
Yeah, I can do another one for sure.
yeah, I guess if we wanted to open it up to the group for questions now, feel free to raise your hand if we get a whole bunch all at once, and we can kind of keep order that way, or if it's a little more casual, I think that'll work out fine too. Yeah, COVID's a bummer. It makes it hard to do these forays. Like, you know, going back to kind of like what the society wants to do, in the grand scheme of things, is like we want to have big forays where we all go out and we to like, um, potentially like the Sam Houston National Forest, and go hunt mushrooms out there, because there's a great diversity of fungi out there, and the increase in precipitation also leads to much more of abundant in just quantities of a single species too, that we could really have some really fun forays. But obviously we can't meet with in groups of larger than 10 people right now, because it's not safe. So COVID definitely kind of put put a damper in some of those things. But I do think we're going to keep doing these online meetings because it makes it easier for everyone to kind of attend, and we can have people from all over the state join us all at once. So kind of, yeah, it's been interesting. So yeah, does anybody else have any questions for Sam?
Yeah, I'll ask a question. Hey Sam, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Chris?
That wasn't my question, but so I was going to ask, when was it that you really started getting into like fungi outside? You know, the diversity of fungi, and what resources were you using to kind of teach yourself, or was it not teaching yourself but going out with other people? What was it that kind of taught you the diversity of mushrooms outdoors?
It started with observation. About 2 years ago, I was going outside doing bike rides, always just like finding cool stuff, but never really knowing what it was. And it was on one specific bike ride 2 years ago in October. I was riding on the trails behind my mom's house, and I found this really cool, bright orange and white mushroom that was just growing out of this tree on the trail that I was on. And I was like, what is that? What is that? And so I like stopped. Like I almost fell off my bike because I skidded to a stop because I was so fascinated by the way this looked. And I was like, oh, it's something called chicken of the woods, and it's edible and it looks like that. Okay. All right. Well, what else is around here? And so I just looked around that area and I found a couple different small little species of mushrooms, like little brown mushrooms. And I was like, okay, how can I find out what these are? And I reached out to my mycologist friends. At that time I had just taken a class with Daniel. And so I was like, hey, what resources can I use to like get more involved and learn more information about the fungus in Texas? And he was like, well, download iNaturalist, 1, 2, get yourself a field guide. So I got the North American mushroom. I don't remember what it's called, but it's a little brown book about that big.
The Gary Linkoff one?
Yes,
Audubon Society guide?
Yeah, the Audubon Society guide. Yeah. And so I started with that one. I started going out. I found a couple things. I was like, oh, this is amazing. I started signing up for plant walks. And when I signed up for plant walks, that's when my knowledge grew the most quickly, because being with people for me is a really great way for me to hold, again, that retention of information. Like when I was out there by myself, I was able to find these, but the retention wasn't there. But with other people, that's when I was really able to step into that world a lot easier.
Yeah, learning with other people. It's like how we've been doing it for forever.
I have another question. if we're taking questions still.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I would classify myself as a beginner for sure, trying to dive into all things mycology. But one of the things that brought me to the topic is just my love of cooking and wanting to experiment more with different varieties and, play with it that way. And I'm surprised I haven't heard much talk today just around the enjoyment of eating and the culinary experience. But I would imagine that's a big part of everyone's life as well, right?
Oh yeah, completely. I eat mushrooms every day. And I can say I have eaten mushrooms every day for the last year, but like on and off for the last 2 years. Once I found that chicken of the woods, I was like, oh my gosh, I just made this amazing meal. And like I ate that meal throughout the week. and I continue to just eat mushrooms ever since, because there is a huge culinary aspect to them that it's so huge. We could talk about it a lot, but there's so much in the realm of fungus, that the culinary aspect is not one that I choose to focus a lot on, just because I don't know a lot about it. I don't know how. I don't know a lot about the descriptions of taste as well as texture, and mushrooms are all about the descriptions of taste and texture, because they're so specific between species. Like piopinos and chestnuts, they look similar, but texturally they have two different ways that they cook, but also two different ways that they taste, and they can taste based off different flavor profiles.
What are some of your favorite ways to cook mushrooms and fungi
You know,
when you
the
do
way
cook them?
when I do cook them, which is every day, I usually just like fry them up. I use like a minimal amount of oil on a cast iron pan. I rip up my oyster mushrooms. I don't ever. I try not to cut my mushrooms. I don't know. That's just me. I like to rip them up because I don't know. There's just some satisfaction in just like piecing apart a mushroom. It's just I don't know. Try it for yourself and talk to me. But I usually cook them, dry saute them, or cook them with a very light amount of oil, and then get them nice and crispy. Add the oil in afterwards. Get them nice and flavorful. Oil or butter afterwards. I like putting plant-based butter in at the end. Is like, ooh, gives them this just like rich taste. And then I add it as like a topping to salads, or if I'm making eggs, I'll put it in some eggs. What I'm going to be experimenting with this week is prepping mushrooms and then eating them, like cooking a batch and then adding them to meals the next 3 days, just to see how that goes. But I got to bring this up because Jeremy, I don't know if you're watching this right now, but if you ever watch this, the way you cook those lion's mane, I have never had something that tasted so delectable.
We're gonna need a recipe.
It was so simple. I'm pretty sure it was a blend of oils for the base, and then just the lion's mane, just heads or lobes. I guess they're lobes. You take the lion's mane lobe out, you put it on the cast iron, and then he just squished it down, and he cooked it on both sides till it was close to blackened. And then he added cloves of garlic in the cast iron as it was cooking, and my goodness, that was so amazing. And then that touch of honey at the end, oh dear, lion's mane and honey is unbelievable.
Yeah, those were really good. I cooked some lion's mane last night, and I did it just the way you were talking about: dry saute, and then add the oil once you can kind of see the moisture coming out of them. Then that's when I add the oil, and man, I got them nice and just like crispy brown, like browned on the edges, and it was so good. So yeah, definitely. I want to start getting a little more creative, and I see someone is in the chat talking about porcinis, and I definitely would love to get that, but I don't. Edible bolets around here are a little different story. I don't have very much experience with them. I know that I would probably be more inclined to eat the ones that I find in the mountains out there, because they're more like what people like to eat. But the ones I found around here, I haven't seen to be too edible. But I want to try doing some more like blended stuff where you like put the mushrooms in a blender and I don't know, make patties out of them or something like that. Something I've been wanting to try.
I've been wanting to try my hand at some mushroom jerky. Because it's pretty simple. It's a great way if you grow a lot of mushrooms or if you have a lot of mushrooms to preserve them indefinitely. And like, who doesn't love mushroom jerky? It's delicious.
Never had it. I think there's a mushroom potluck event in our future.
Oh man, that sounds really fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and like I keep talking about stuff. We have plans, and like COVID's not going to be around forever, so keep this in mind. But we want to do a mushroom festival for around here, where we have like bring in speakers and kind of do our lecture series, but kind of have it all in a weekend and then do the lectures during the day, and then have a big parties at night where we cook food. We could do a cook off. I know there's all sorts of things, but yeah, that's the kind of stuff we will be able to plan together when the time is right for it.
So after being on a canoe for the majority, or a kayak for the majority of today, I also would like to see a kayak mushroom trip for sure. I think we should plan something to where we can take some kayaks out, drop them in the water, and just like kind of slowly work our way through some rich riparian areas.
That does sound like a lot of fun. I know there's really decent water trails in this area, and I think out in the east too, that we could to make that a possibility. That would be really fun, and a kind of like a cool twist on mushroom forays, I think. All sorts of great recipes being dropped in the chat.
Oh, wow.
Candied mushrooms.
Yes.
Dipped in honey, rolled in sugar, dehydrated for 24 hours. That sounds awesome.
Oh wow.
Is it with a jelly fungi? Go ahead,
Did you
Heather.
find the snow fungus this past weekend? I saw the pictures.
Yeah, I think Allie found that on her venture when she went out.
That's real common, like kind of like sweet porridge, desserty fungus in Asia. I was reading up on it, and it's also used mostly for cosmetic. Like they cultivate it like crazy in Asia, and you can buy it in most of the Asian groceries in Austin. It's not as great, dehydrated, but fresh. I've found it a few times in Austin, and it's super good in soups, but I didn't realize it was like a sweet, desserty fungus. So now I really want to try it.
That's really cool. I found some of those. Allie and I did when we were kayaking on the San Marcos River the other day. So talk about a confluence of all the topics we were just talking about.
We just had a mycelial mass, all
right. Linking up.
Hey, Sam, do you have an idea of where you'd want to take a canoe trip? Because I also think that's an amazing idea.
For the sake of ease, I would say like somewhere like along the San Marcos River or along the Guadalupe. I mean, the Guadalupe is just like a great river in general. It's one of my favorites. There's a lot of good fungus around there. Like today I found, my goodness, if I could have harvested all of it, it would have probably been close to 10 pounds of Hexagonia hydenoids. There was so much, and it grows so high in the tree. Like these massive cypress trees will have died off, and they'll have like their main trunks, and then at the top of the trunk, for some reason, mostly at the top, they have all these different little like hexagonias popping out. But locally would be good, just because like we could pop in there really quick without much like renting of things or coordination, other than like just like getting ourselves there with canoes. But I would love to go somewhere in East Texas. That would be super cool. Especially around the Houston area. I feel like there's a lot of things
Canoe
to
with the
discover.
alligators.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some pretty decent trips that I think we could probably plan for around here. Like one that I think would be pretty fun would be, and I think I'm pretty sure this would work out, but either on the San Marcos or the Comal down to Palmetto State Park and put in at one of the headwaters of the rivers and then go all the way down, because I'm pretty sure that's the confluence of those two rivers anyway, where they meet up before they go down to the Gulf. Also, in my mind, I want to go down from San Marcos to to that confluence and then back up into New Braunfels. That would be a fun trip to me. That would be a lot of work, I think. But
it would be a few days for sure.
You think so? I feel like you could do it
so.
maybe in two
I don't
long
know.
days. I don't know. I haven't been down the Comal, which is something I want to do. So
it's fun. It's a lot of fun, but definitely I mean, just how long it took us to go. It took us 6 hours to go 6 miles today on kayaks. We were going pretty slow, but it took us a long time. And I feel like, and we didn't take food or snacks. So including those and foraging breaks, those are going to be like if we could do a 4-day canoe trip, I feel like that would be a good run, because that would give us enough time to stop and put in and be able to walk around in areas and really get to know the different areas we're exploring.
We just gotta be careful about trespassing.
True.
On the river
Especially
banks.
the Comal. There's not many places. There aren't any places along the Comal where you can just hop off and go foraging for mushrooms.
Usually you can hang out on the banks, no problem. But once you start to wander too far away from the banks of the river, you could ask for some trouble.
Okay, totally different topic, but Sam, what's one of the craziest mushrooms you found, or stuck out to you the most, or however you want to answer that?
Was it called the Earth's Tongue that we found? That one, and the way that it was found was just the wildest, coolest, most. That's where that mycelial communication comes into play, because I was just walking around out there in the big thicket with all y'all that last foray, and we had just taken the pitcher plant trail. Was it the pitcher plant trail? Yeah, and something spoke to me. It's your plane of existence is way different than mushrooms is right now. Fix it. And so I was like, oh, I need to get down on the ground now. Right now. So I just dropped down where I was, and it was like, well, you like to crawl, right? You're all about cool crawling movements. So do some crawling. You haven't crawled for a few days. So I was crawling around on the bottom of the floor, going underneath different plants, which is in itself really awesome experience. And then I look over and I see these little black things just sticking up, and I'm like, it's Ophiocordyceps. Yes, we found cordyceps. Let's go. And then it got closer, and I was like, oh, it's almost growing rhizomorphically. It's not growing off of anything. And so after my yell of excitement and everyone started to come around, that moment right there, as I was just on the forest floor, hearing my friends around me just gathering to see this cool mushroom, that was the wildest experience and also mushroom that I found. And also the one that made me feel just like overwhelming joy and happiness to be in this body and in this existence.
Hell yeah. Those super tiny little black fungi. Like if people aren't familiar with them, we'll definitely post a photo of what he's talking about on the Instagram, or maybe someone could drop a photo in the chat if they have one. But they're tiny, tiny, tiny little fungi. It's almost, they're the kind of fungi that you definitely would miss if you're not feeling them call out to you.
So that's something else that you'll get on a foray with me is, we'll crawl if you want.
Yeah, there you go. Chris dropped a photo of it in the chat, so if anybody wants to see it.
I want to see it.
Yeah, I've been really pleased with how our progress as a group has been evolving, Sam, and it's I'm glad you're on board with the whole project.
Oh, absolutely. I'm like, I did actually hear you laugh, Allie. That made me smile. I was like, because crawling is like it's something I do. I love crawling, crawling and walking. Like, oh my goodness. But let's talk about it. Get at me. I'm happy to be on board too. The growth in this year alone with CTMS has been phenomenal. Phenomenal. It shows that this was a much needed aspect of the community that wasn't there, that is there now. And I can only hope and give thanks for our continued growth, and thank everyone who's watching this video right now, because you all are who made it possible for us to be here, for us to be online chatting with you and talking about mushrooms. So keep being our members, keep supporting us. You're changing the world.
I agree. Does anybody else have any more questions for Sam or about the society in general?
I know it's getting late, but I wouldn't mind hearing a little bit more about your mushroom beds. That seems super cool.
Yeah. What would you like to know about them?
Well, I mean, how 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 technical, how difficult is it to maintain for someone without specialized experience? Is it something that we could do on our own, or that sort of thing?
Totally something you can do on your own. No specialized equipment or experience necessary. It's basically what you're doing as someone who is being a steward of a mushroom bed is you're just kind of existing, and then you're existing next to the mushroom bed. So they do their thing, and you like make sure that they have like food and water and like love. Just like tell them like how much you're thankful for them and like how great they are and how much they're going to grow up to be big, strong mushrooms that you're going to eat. And that's pretty much it. They do mostly their own things. Put the blocks out there, break them up. So what I like to do is a layered method. So I do like wood chips as the base, followed by cardboard. If it's not like small pieces of cardboard, I perforate the cardboard. Or just put little holes in it just for drainage sake. And then I put broken up mycelium blocks, followed by wood chips, followed by usually more blocks, or I just keep it at just like blocks and wood chips. And that seems to do extremely well for them. Always American-made cardboard, very important. And they they really are able to do their own thing. You just kind of, you're their backup. If it's like too, if the weather gets too extreme, like it can in Texas, especially with the dryness, like you just provide them with the extra water they need to continue their running, because they'll stop running if left to nature's devices. But our goals are to always keep the mycelium running. We want to keep it moving. We want to keep it growing. We want to keep it expanding, because the bigger the system is, the harder it is to remove. So when we have a whole yard filled with mycelium, it's strong. But when we have a whole neighborhood filled with mycelium, it's even stronger. And that's the methodology behind my idea for blocks is, let's set beds in little areas, but I want those beds to grow out into your whole yard, and you can be a participant in that part of it. So to set up a bed, no experience, no specialized anything necessary. To run the mycelium, you have to communicate with the mushrooms. So that's where you have to have that gnosis. So that does require experience, but it only requires experience within yourself. So the more you go in, the more you'll be able to communicate with the mushrooms, and the more you'll be able to run the mycelium.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What are some species that you would suggest for doing that? I know you mentioned oyster mushrooms earlier. Is there any other ones that you would recommend, or ones, excuse me, that you would avoid?
Ones that I would recommend, shiitakes. They're really good to set during like the winter months, because they take such a long time to like really get established and settled. They won't produce fruits. Right now, like, is kind of like on the tail, is on the tail end of when a shiitake bed has the most success, but you can still set them. They'll still grow out pretty well. They're very hardy. King Stropharia. I actually haven't seen a King Stropharia be very successful in Texas yet. So if you're buying culture, I would say King Stropharia is one that, if you're looking for fruits, if you're looking for actual mushrooms, to not necessarily purchase that one. But if you're looking to just get a wide variety of, or a diversity within your garden, like Stropharia is a really good one, because it attracts other species of mushrooms too, other species of mycelium, as well as mold. Mold is good outside.
Yeah, mold is good for your plants. Plant roots love trichoderma. So when your indoor cultivation projects go wrong, you can just add them to your compost pile if you have one, and you're feeding your plants. Full circle.
Full circle.
I was just gonna pop and say, I don't know. So I have had a few people that have recently had a lot more people are eating mushrooms, I think, and I've had a couple people call me because they have gotten a really bad rash, and it turned out that it was raw shiitakes that they were eating. So a lot of people don't realize that you can have a reaction to raw shiitakes. And it is a pretty severe reaction and rash. So just because I've seen it like in 3 different people in the last like 3 months, and I haven't seen it in many years, I just thought I'd bring it up. So not that you shouldn't eat them raw, you totally know your own body, but I just thought I'd pop in and say that, because it just seems like it's happening. So clusters happen, but anyway, just thought I'd mention it.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. That's interesting. I've never seen or heard of anyone until now have a reaction to raw shiitakes, but I can totally see how, especially consumed raw, you could have a reaction to things. There are certain mushrooms, when I eat them raw, that don't sit well in my stomach. So everyone's body is definitely different. So I've heard of some people reacting to portobello's, Agaricus bisporus, pretty negatively too, in terms of like gastrointestinal distress. So the disclaimer, if you're eating a mushroom for the first time, probably don't eat it raw. Oh wow, you got sick on lion's mane?
Well, actually, so I was gonna say, with allergies, actually, it's you should definitely do that. Anytime you do something for the first time, you should definitely do like a skin test. Same with plants and things like that. But actually, a lot of allergies happen over multiple exposures, and so because the body, starts reacting to those antibodies that are created, and so. It can happen at any time, and shiitakes are kind of known for this. And in fact, it's pretty well written about in Japanese medical literature and stuff like that. So, and it basically looks like stretch marks. The rash looks like stretch marks. So yeah, and the last guy that got it, I had to put him on steroids for almost 2 weeks to get him to calm down. So the rash to calm down. So I just thought I'd bring it up because you were talking about shiitakes and just,
Yeah, thanks for sharing. So you ate too much lion's mane and got sick off of it. Eesh. And it was your first time. How much did you eat though? Like, I'm curious.
All right. So I found a big lion's mane in the woods. It was like, I want to say it was like football size, right? And I brought it home, and I was dating this girl at the time, and I was like, I'm gonna have dinner prepared when she gets home. Like, I'm cooking it, and I made some pasta. It was gonna be like served with pasta, And she gets home and she like sees it, and she's like, I'm not gonna eat that. And I was like, what? I harvested this from the woods and I can't let it go to waste. So I guess I'm gonna eat it all. And she just like ate pasta, and I just ate like this massive thing of lion's mane, and I never had it before, and I really enjoyed it. But then I went and we were laying in bed, and then my stomach was just like unhappy with me, and I had to make multiple trips back and forth from like throughout the night to the bathroom to throw up. And I actually had like a very trippy dream too that night of like a lion's mane floating in the woods and like chasing me. It was like at night, and it was glowing and like pulsating and chasing me, and it was like one of those silly dreams where you're like running and looking back. And yeah, so I think they say like when it's your first time trying a new species of mushroom, always try a little bit the first time, and I did not do that. So
I bet your girlfriend was glad she didn't partake.
yeah, right.
She's probably like, I told you.
I've had lion's mane since then and have never had an issue, but I think it was the first time and just overdoing it. So
yeah, volume might have had something to do with it.
And if you think about I believe that we're not in competition with the world. We're in a symbiotic relationship with everything. And it's not about competition. But if you think about that, if you've never had the mushroom, it kind of needs to get introduced to your body a little bit and to create that relationship. And so sometimes we have to go easy on those beginning relationships. And then once we've had it a little bit, our bodies are like, oh, friend, like, come on in, so.
I also wonder.
No, go ahead, Sam.
What was it grown on, or what kind of tree was the lion's mane on?
I'm pretty sure it was a Quercus pagoda. It's like a cherry bark oak, which is it's probably more common in the Houston area than southern red oak, but it looks a lot like southern red oak.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm. That also reminds me of that when you are foraging mushrooms and you find something that you want to try and eat for the first time and you're identifying it, you should not eat all of what you have collected. Eat the small amount like we've been talking about, but also keep some in its not cooked form. So if you do have like a really severe reaction, you can take it to the doctor and be like, I ate this, oh shit. That kind of thing, because that will help a lot in dealing with that issue too, so they kind of have a better idea of maybe how to treat you. But most of the time you're just going to get sick like that, like vomiting, gastrointestinal sickness,
Or trip your ass off.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe, but that's illegal. Not everywhere anymore.
Not everywhere.
The police
Good old
state
Oregon.
is on the back foot.
So that's something I actually wanted to talk about today too, was the changes that Oregon has made. Like, whoa. They basically
I get ads on Instagram from psychedelic mushroom dealers and constantly. I guess they got my number. I don't know, but I do. All of a sudden, though, like they all just came alive.
So what about what happened in Oregon, in Portland, or I guess it was in all over Oregon?
It was all over Oregon. Yeah. So I don't know. In my opinion and in my understanding of how things work, that change is literally the start of a new era, because now there's opportunity to study. Now there is a reason to study. And
Okay,
now
hold on. So for people who aren't familiar, Oregon in November they decriminalized all controlled substances like cannabis. Well, obviously they already had legal cannabis, but yeah, all like psychedelics, any like hard drugs, anything, they decriminalize them so they can start to deal with them in a more like a health-centered framework instead of a criminal justice framework. But for psilocybin mushrooms, they actually legalized it for therapy. So they'll be able to start doing psychedelic assisted therapy with mushrooms, which is what Sam was just talking about being able to do research and stuff. So I know, sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to like bring everyone up to speed on that framework.
No, yeah, that's good. I didn't give a preface to what I was saying, so that's perfect. But this allows this allows the fear behind the study, the mycophobia, but not fear of mushrooms, fear of authority behind this country. It lessens it. So now you're able to study a sacred medicine and truly study the root of it and the different constituents of it to create a better understanding. And creating a better understanding is creating better communication, and more communication equals more downloads. So by unlocking this field and releasing the shackles of the war on drugs, there are definite changes that are going to come of this that we won't even know the full impact of and the scope of until we're already past them. Not to mention, people are very ingenuitous about creating different phenotypes within strains. And so I'm just frankly excited to see some cool looking mushrooms come about this, because like, I don't know, people are beautiful in that way of creation. And when you're creating, you're speaking to the universe. And so like what you create is your like gift to the universe and gift from the universe. So I want to see what kind of gifts people bring up, because man, they're going to be cool.
And I think we're going to, like you said, we're going to learn a lot about the way different strains of fungi like are able to be used in these therapeutic contexts, because I know there is variability in how in the constituent parts that make the mushrooms active, and those have different different applications in therapy also. So it's very exciting in that way. And I think it and pairing it with the broader decriminalization movement, it can be very synergistic, because the psychedelic assisted psychotherapies have been are starting to be more and more documented to be able to help people overcome addiction. So a lot of you could I guess to kind of like lay out a scenario, you could have someone who's addicted to heroin go to like a safe injection site and then find out about a psychedelic assisted psychotherapy program there and be dealing with their addiction in a supportive environment instead of having to worry about like being criminalized for developing an addiction, which is a mental illness instead of a personal choice. So my 2 cents on that.
I like it.
Do we have any more questions? Any more topics we want to kind of pick the mycologist's brains on? I think we covered foraging. We've covered cultivation. We've covered psychedelic mushrooms and psychedelic therapy. We've talked about engaging with nature. Talked about future plans for the Myco Society. Is there anything else we didn't cover tonight?
We haven't covered breath.
Breath? Well,
Yeah.
tell us about breath, Sam. What is important about breath and fungi?
Breath is the beginning of all things. So breath and fungi, they go hand in hand. You know, our bodies produce carbon dioxide and we expel it through breath. Mushrooms produce carbon dioxide and they expel it through their porises. I don't know actually how they expel it, but they expel it. So they breathe too. But with breath, it is the baseline for everything. So when you have a proper breath work technique, you have a foundation with which you can go forward and live your life from. So when you find your breath, you can always go back to your breath. That's your baseline. And when you're communicating with a being that you don't speak a language of, your breath is extremely important because it's going to keep you here. It's going to keep you grounded and centered to be able to hear. And that goes for everybody, like everything. Like if you're speaking with another human that you don't know the language of, like you have to stay with your breath. If you start like losing your breath, get all like breathing fast, you're not going to actually hear what they're saying. If you're talking to a baby, if you're communicating with a baby, like that's pretty much all breath because they're mimicking you. They're receiving you in a way that is completely unadulterated. Ah, that's funny. Unadulterated. So breath and mushrooms go hand in hand because we both breathe. We both are made of similar cellular structures. So
they're our closest non-animal cousin. Yeah. So I think that was actually a really beautiful spot to end it on too. So if we have any more questions, feel free to ask them. But if everybody's is done, I think it's might be time to sign off the broadcast and we can hang out for a little bit more in our little in our Zoom meeting if we want. But I need to go to bed soon. I got to work tomorrow.
Yeah, I'm exhausted. I've been on the river all day. It was so cold.
Yeah, we got like the wind today was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
It's just because the sun was out, but the wind was just constant. I don't know. I work outside, so I'm also I was right there with you. It's cold today. It's cold, even though the sun was out.
Yep.
All right. Well, everyone who's watching this video, thank you for tuning in. Tuning in and come back next. I guess not next week, but in 2 weeks when Chris will actually be talking about forest ecology and fungi and all that fun stuff. Buenos noches.